Greetings, good people. Welcome to Who Knows It's Just Life, the podcast. I'm your host, Kyle. Thank you for fitting me into your day today. On today's episode, I'll be speaking with my guest, Mai Spann-Wilson, who's a longtime friend of mine. And we'll be speaking about his perception of the current events and the current tone that's going on in Philadelphia right now. You know, definitely a lot going on with the killing of Walter Wallace Jr. So we're going to get into that. But first, to introduce Mai. I first met Mai while we were studying at the University of Maryland in college. And Mai is a musician. He's a producer and MC. And that's one of the first things we connected off of doing music. In his professional life, he's a professor of conflict resolution at Temple University. He's the president and CEO of Kofa Kicks, LLC. He also facilitates diversity training and is a therapist specializing in treating men who have committed domestic abuse. So with that, thank you very much for joining me, Mai. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for inviting me. I'm looking forward to it.
All right. So before we get started, I usually kick it off with, a brief check-in on what's been going on. So it could be about world events, local events, just personally what's going on. So do you have any updates that you would like to offer?
Man, I'm looking forward to today, man. Like you said, a lot's going on right now in Philly. Just a lot going on with the climate. Obviously, we just elected Joe Biden. So that's heavy. I'm thinking about people partying in the streets in Philadelphia. That was cool. I think that was a lot of stress for a lot of people. I know a lot of people around me were very worried. And it almost feels like one of the first wins for a lot of people in 2020. So
yeah, that's real.
So that's major.
Yeah, that's definitely true. So let's get into the main topic of today's discussion, which is the state of Philadelphia. And, weighing heavily on Philadelphia is the killing of Walter Wallace Jr., which occurred a few weeks ago. And I thought it'd be great to have Mai on the show because he is a resident in Philadelphia, has lived there for a while. And he was the original person that told me about it. As y'all know, I just got on social media, so that's not the way I hear about things. A lot of times I hear about things from people who know me and just kind of clue me into things and that sort of thing. So, Mai was the one that told me about it. And, he told me about it just after I had recorded the first podcast. So I didn't mention it, in the original recording of the first one, but I knew this was a topic that I wanted to get into. So Mai, being in Philly and just your proximity to the incident, can you just break down, how it was that you heard about it and just kind of take us through what it was like being in Philadelphia, when it took place and when you heard about it?
Okay, well, being in Philly, I don't know, I think that this one just hit me different than other shootings that have happened or other killings by officers. I'm trying to remember initially how I heard about it. I think initially I heard about it on social media, and then I was talking to my sister about it, and I was, I think that because we were having some conflict about our viewpoint on it, it made me feel like, I got to watch this video. And I usually, as a mental health professional, I usually advise people not to watch videos. But I watched this video and I felt like there was something humane about me watching this video, because by watching the video, as hard as it was, I think that I needed to reattach myself to that anger, that authentic anger that comes from watching a video, and the other emotions that are underneath that anger, the sadness, the pain. But even more so by watching the video, because there was a young man who was holding his cell phone, and he was just watching the event occur, and you can see this young man saying "Oh shit, they just killed somebody in front of me," and at that moment, I kind of almost was able to empathize and be like, I could have been holding that camera. And even more so, because it happened 4 blocks from my house, it just hit different that I could have been holding that camera, or I could have been that young man, that got shot. So it just hit me really hard on that level.
Damn. Yeah, that's real. And I know there's different stages of people's perceptions of how to treat those videos that come out. I think the police body camera video just was released a couple of days ago. I think it might have been yesterday or the day before. And I have chosen to not watch videos like that after, I can't remember the last one I saw, but I know Ahmaud Arbery's video came out earlier this year. I didn't watch that. It was impossible not to see some footage of George Floyd's, but I didn't sit down and watch the entire thing. And I kind of I can appreciate and understand why you advise people not to watch them. Some people do think it's important. And I think it's interesting that in this case, it was helpful or necessary for you, and at least in this moment, to be retapped into that anger and rage and all the other feelings that you mentioned. Maybe I should watch it too. And I'm curious. I wonder how different it comes across with the footage from, you know, a young man in the community holding his cell phone versus the body cam footage that's been released now. Just those different perspectives. I'm not sure if that matters or what, but yeah. And the fact that it was so close to you too, just geographically, that's crazy, man.
And so, yeah, like what's the name of your podcast again?
So the podcast is called Who Knows, It's Just Life. And the premise, I should say this in the beginning of the show, but the premise is just, you know, I don't know, and I'm still learning. And so, you know, life is happening, things take place, and we have our experiences, and we have some things that we understand to this point. And that's we operate in the world with what we already currently know, but we're all still learning, and we're all trying to figure out this world as it's coming to us and as we come to it. And so that's the name of the show, and that's kind of the perspective, you know, that. And so any topic that we talk about here, it's really just about expressing that learning process about that given topic.
And the reason I asked you, I knew that the topic related to talking about Walter Wallace Jr. The lessons that I'm learning in the moment, as I told you, I tell people not to watch the video, you know, but one thing that I just learned, as, you know, we try to be conscious people that, you know, are aware of privilege and our own privilege. One thing I was aware of is that, you know, yes, on one side it's traumatizing to watch these videos. On the other side, there's a privilege that we have by not seeing these videos and so I was very aware, and I was like, yo, I don't feel connected to that privilege this time of being able to not watch this video. Like, I feel like I like this happened in my community, and I have to be part of this. Like, and so that's one thing that I was aware of, that there's a certain way you can feel, as much as it hurts you to see somebody killed, 10 states away, that it just hits different when you're like, wait, I live in Philly and this happened in Philly. Wait, I live in West Philly and this happened in West Philly. Like, it just hits totally different. And I think that it just changed my perspective on the police brutality in general.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great point. I had that conversation a year ago with my brother when we were talking about the documentary on Netflix, the docudrama, When They See Us. And I think he had already seen it, and he was like, yeah, you got to see this. And I was like, yeah, but do I really need to see? I mean, isn't it traumatic and da-da-da-da-da? And he was like, yeah, you speaking from privilege right now. Like, these were some young brothers' lives. And, like, you have the opportunity to watch it, but you can also choose not to. And I was like, yeah, I mean, I was like, you're right. And a lot of times what does ultimately push me to choose to experience visual trauma like that is the fact that I have a son, and I need to be aware of what this society has done to Black boys and Black men. And I think there is some dosage of that is necessary to keep us tapped into that in a deeper sense.
And again, I'm gonna go back to that word again, in a humane expense, in a humane, because like, so Kyle introduced me and talked about our connection at University of Maryland. Something that really made me realize this even deeper. One of my favorite people from University of Maryland's name is Nkemka, and she lives in Philadelphia now. And she sent me a message a few days after Walter Wallace Jr. was shot, and was like, yo, watch me on Instagram Live. I'm going to be doing this. And it was so powerful because she was on talking about the trauma of the situation, but she was also, there was another therapist on that was interviewing her and was talking to her about, like, sometimes we just need to slow down and feel this. So, like, what are you feeling right now? What are you feeling in your body about what just happened? And it was just like so powerful. And we forget that the body informs us. Like, when we actually feel, a lot of the answers that we're intellectualizing, we won't ever get those until we feel. So so that's the beauty of actually actually living in it. Because when you watch the reaction, or you see what what's the young man that went down south that was dragged and then thrown in the river, and his mom had an open casket.
Oh, Emmett Till.
Yeah, when you see the way that Emmett Till's mother was able to do that, she was able to do that because she was informed by what she felt in her body. That world needs to see this. She would have never been able to make that decision if she wasn't feeling and she shut down, right? So, a lot of times when we're in our own relationships with people, like, the information that we really need is in feeling it and feeling going deep into the roots and feeling what we're supposed to feel. And so I found myself tearing up and crying as Nkemka was on there talking about, she said the same thing. I didn't want to watch the video, but I found myself watching it, and like, I felt like I needed to watch it. And then a tear just went down my face. Like, I'm relating. Not only am I like relating to this person that I was close to 12 years ago in college and I haven't seen since, but now she's in Philadelphia, also living a few blocks away from me. I need to connect with this sister. Like, she's living right here, and she may be like an angel sent to like be here with me during this time. Like, that there's this humanity in it that you won't realize until you actually are willing to feel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's very powerful, and I'm glad you circled back to that, because I meant to when you said there was a humanity to watching the video. And yeah, I mean, trauma and anger and the feelings associated with seeing something like that is part of humanity. That's part of being human, and it's part of. I mean, we should feel, if we're healthy human beings, we should feel solidarity with people. We should feel connected to every person on the planet, for real. And so, yeah, that's a good point to make. Another aspect of this case that I think is worth talking about is the fact that Walter Wallace I think he was experiencing a mental health crisis in that moment, and I think it was his brother, a family member, called the police, because of what was taking place in the home. And, the fact that the police are involved for mental health crises, and he was holding a knife, so that there was a weapon that could be used for bodily harm. But mental health crises are definitely different than a truly criminal situation where a weapon is involved. And I was looking into this a little bit. There was a couple articles that I read about the West Philadelphia Consortium and John White, and how that community of people knew Walter Wallace and engaged with him, and they are part of an organization who right now informally is connected to the police and can respond first to situations where mental health is a factor. Do you have any thoughts on that, especially with your workings as a therapist and in mental health?
Yeah, man. I mean, one thing I can say is that I know that I heard that the family didn't call the police, they called the ambulance and said, we want the ambulance specifically, and we don't want the police to come. So
right, that's true. That's true.
So they were very aware that their child was suffering from a mental health crisis, and I think that we have such a low standard. The fact that people's mind would go to, trying to defend the officers in the situation, because they might have felt danger because he was holding a knife, right? In the video, the knife was, I couldn't even, it was so small you couldn't see the knife, right? But the fact that you could send armed forces when there's more than one person to confront one single person and feel like I'm so threatened that I need to just open fire, is problematic. It speaks volumes about the system. It speaks volumes about the way that we engage, and the fact that he was having a mental health crisis. Even more so, there should be a lot of different ways that this could have been de-escalated. As a mental health professional, I've been in dangerous situations, as a lot of other people who are social workers or mental health professionals, where you're threatened and you have to find other ways to de-escalate. And there is no gun to lean on in that situation. So I'm befuddled at this defense that, like, oh, I felt threatened, so I had to just like open fire. When I'm like, how do you feel threatened when there's multiple officers there? And okay, and maybe you do have some fear, but how does that mean that now I have to like just pull out a gun and just open fire?
Yeah, they had their guns drawn early too. Like I haven't seen the video, but I've read the descriptions of actually I read the description of the body cam video, and I mean they pulled out early.
Yeah, they pulled out. They didn't shoot once. They didn't shoot to de-escalate. They shot to kill. Yeah. It was obvious that they shot to kill, and the fact that would be acceptable, to people is extremely problematic. And we can, people don't want to have this discussion, but we can just look at historically the way that officers have been able to de-escalate white people. We can just look at it historically and look at how well officers have been able to de-escalate, white people, and how much more dangerous of situations.
Yeah, that's real.
That officers were in, even as far as officers running away at full speed. So we have questions there. There's questions about why that is so.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, you mentioned, your ability to, de-escalate situations that, might have been potentially threatening or could have turned violent. And one of the things that one of these articles, and I should cite the article. I read an article on BillyPenn.com, which was entitled "How Mental Health Pros Intervene on a 9/11 Call: What Didn't Happen for Walter Wallace Jr." And in this article, they talked about two acronyms that are used to help de-escalate situations like that. One of them is LEAP, LEAP, which stands for Listen, Empathize, Agree, and Partner. And the second is CAF, which is Calm, Assess, Facilitate. And those are two that I had never heard of before. And it sounds like, and this organization is definitely equipped with that knowledge and people who understand how to use those in tense situations. And I'm not sure if you've you use those specifically, but these resources are available. And the fact that, police arrive on site, and you know how police are. We see the videos, we see TV shows and everything. Like, police usually have an elevated voice when they're in a tense situation. They like, drop your weapon, that they're yelling at you or whatever. And in this case, as soon as Walter Wallace, as soon as they knew he had a knife, they drew their weapons and they're yelling at him to drop his weapon. And there was no listen, there was no empathize, there was no agree, no partner, no calm, or no assess. Like, all of that was thrown out the window off the jump, And it kind of just goes to the point that there are better ways to handle mental health crises. And I'm glad you corrected me, because the family called 911 for an ambulance. You're correct. Yeah, you're absolutely right about that. Because they know, as a family of a loved one who has mental health issues, and being black, like they know the consequences when the police show up. People know, black people know that, especially with mental health too. So it's very important to note that they did call for an ambulance. Specifically, the fact that it's the police that show up, that they're the first responders, and they reacted the way they did. They obviously did not use any of these two acronyms. That's just tragic, and especially since Philadelphia has those resources not far from where this incident happened in the first place.
I mean, I'll take it a step further. The only resources that were actually trying to practice this de-escalation was the mother. You can hear the mother's voice saying, like, "Don't shoot." And the mother knew that her son could be de-escalated a different way. right? So you literally have, this young man being murdered in front of his mother, and I mean, I was told his children also saw. I mean, I didn't see the children in the video, but I mean, this is just, traumatic on all levels, and I just felt like it could have been de-escalated a different way.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I did see an article. I saw a post of an article on CNN that said that New York City has initiated a plan to include mental health professionals in their first response to situations like that, which is good. And I know in these Billy Penn articles, I read a couple of them about this. They said that Philadelphia has been long considering involving mental health professionals in situations like this. And obviously, what they were saying is that right now it's an informal thing. Certain police officers know who to call, but it's nowhere near procedural or required. 911 operators, should be more standardized in terms of making sure, assessing whether or not mental health is a factor, and then there should be written procedures in a consistent, standardized approach to involving the correct folks as first responders, and then the police being, secondary responders if at all necessary. That's hopefully some good news, at least in New York, and hopefully Philly gets its act together as well. Do you think that's enough? Is that enough? Do you think there's more that should be done?
Yeah, I mean, I also think that, I read another article saying, because people were saying, how come they didn't have billy sticks and how come they didn't use that? And then I read another article saying that like less than 60% of officers have access to like billy sticks, and there's not even enough for all the officers, and there's not enough resources there.
I even heard that they didn't even have tasers.
They didn't have the same thing with tasers.
Everybody's got a gun, but they didn't have tasers or billy clubs. What?
They said there's not enough tasers for all the officers either.
Interesting.
So I think that's worth investigating. I mean, I don't even know, how much truth there is to it or not, but I definitely feel like that's worth investigating. I think either way is problematic.
Well, the article I think I saw an article on NPR that said that they did not have tasers and that there was a shortage of tasers. That was a known issue leading up to that day, that not every cop had a taser. So that, I'll post. So the articles that I'm talking about, I'll post them on the notes for the show so y'all can read it yourselves. So I know Philly has been pulsating for months since George Floyd. Philly was one of the most active cities that I saw. Everybody was doing stuff, but Philly was definitely pulsating with activity and protest and uprising as a result of George Floyd's killing. And another friend of ours in Philly was telling me about how there was a lot of activity around certain statues. I know the Frank Rizzo statue was taken down, and I think eventually the Christopher Columbus statue was taken down in Philadelphia. So there was a lot of momentum and movement towards that. How does the people's reaction to Walter Wallace Jr.'s killing compare to the tone that had already been in the city as a result of George Floyd and other incidents?
Yeah, I mean, again, I want to say that this one felt even more close to home, as far, again, because I live in West Philly. This happened in West Philly, and so we gathered at Malcolm X Park, which is a famous park in West Philly. It's a park where a lot of where the Juneteenth celebration happens, and we gathered there and walked and felt the pulse and the vibe of the people in West Philly. We walked all throughout West Philly and in protest, and that just felt totally different than some of the other protests that had happened downtown and in Philadelphia, right? And some of them might have happened in different parts of the city, but this was centralized and focused in the same neighborhood where this trauma happened to a young man, and we knew that we were walking the same streets that he probably walked, that he probably grew up playing on, right? And it just felt different, and we heard people's outrage that directly were impacted in this same neighborhood and community, and looked people in the eyes that probably knew this young man, right? So it just felt different, Some of those other things that happened, yes, you're right. Like Philly has been very active, protesting all throughout the quarantine, for Ahmaud Arbery and George Floyd, and
Breonna Taylor too, I'm sure.
Breonna Taylor, so I think that, it's been a continued protest but this one just felt like centralized in my neighborhood. Like, so it just felt, it felt different for that reason. And let me say this, like, the same thing I mentioned earlier about in Kemka being a student that I knew at University of Maryland. But like when I was walking the streets protesting for Walter Wallace Jr., I turned around and the first person I saw was a friend of mine named Gabe, and Gabe is from Michigan. And when I turned 18, I ended up going to community college in Michigan for a little while. And Gabe was one of the coolest people I ever met in Michigan. So like, so here from University of Maryland, I have this cool person. Like if there was one person I would have want to be in Philly during this protest, from Maryland, it would have been in Kemka. If it was one person from Michigan, it would have been Gabe. And like the first person I saw when I turned around, I'm like, oh shoot. So like to be able to build with these people, and we're sitting here talking about restorative justice while we're walking during this protest, like me and Gabe, and it was just so dope. Like that's what I'm talking about, the humanity of being there. If I wasn't there, I wouldn't have ran into Gabe. Like so when you're in the foxhole with people who are radically loving, you end up building in a way that you're not expecting that you're going to build. Again, the body, the universe informs you in ways that you weren't expecting.
Yeah, that's real. It's I think it's always beautiful when things like that come together out of tragedy. I mean, some of my favorite memories of seeing family members were at funerals. You have sometimes tragedy brings out like just a certain energy out of people, and that brings out some really, really memorable times. And for a situation like this, obviously everybody was riveted by what took place, and I don't believe in accidents. I don't think it's an accident that Gabe was right there and that Nkemka hit you up and happened to be in the city. And I think that it's just beautiful that in that moment of trauma, you were able to find people who were in the city and experiencing that with you, and you had that real solidarity and that touch point with them. I bet that was a very mutually healing experience for all of y'all.
Right. Yeah, man. And shout out to Gabe Peoples. He's a professor. But we first met similar to Kyle. Like we first met in Michigan when one of my friends was like, "Yo, there's this hip hop and R&B group. Like you need to come." And I just ended up showing up, and I ended up meeting Gabe, and he was one of the MCs / poets and we've been friends and hit it off ever since. So
yeah, definitely. So I guess last question about Philly. Now that was a few weeks. So that was I guess literally a week before the election. With the drama that was the election and that whole thing, how is the energy in the city right now? I mean, is there still a lot of movement around Walter Wallace Jr.? I know there was some celebration around Biden winning. What's the kind of tone and the energy in the city like now?
I mean, I would say that I think people are still organizing, and I definitely think that we had a victory though that like I said, like I mean I saw faces out and about in West Philly dancing the streets, blocking traffic, and just I think that this city really needed this win, like as far as the election goes for Biden. And yeah, man, I think that people are still angry and upset about Walter Wallace Jr. and that is still, there's still a lot of organizing. But I think right now people are there's a lot of healing that's being done. People are in pain. Yeah, man. Like I think that as far as a community, we're coming together. I think through all of this we'll grow. Like I think through all of this we'll become stronger. So I think that's ultimately like what's happening right now in Philly.
Yeah, that's what's up. And obviously, not to be lost in it, Pennsylvania's the state that tipped it, right? So the fact that the election was all dramatic and close and everything, it took time to get all the votes counted and everything. And it was Pennsylvania, the state that you live in and voted in, that was the state that tipped it over the edge. So I mean, all that celebration is warranted across the country for those who wanted this outcome. Y'all especially deserve to celebrate since you were the state that were the tipping point in the electoral college. So So props to you all for showing up and doing your thing and making that a reality. So yeah, appreciate that.
Yeah, man. Yeah, no, it felt good. It felt good. It felt good. I think it felt good to everybody, but it was like yeah, man. It felt good.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. And one thing I talked about in my last episode is that Biden and Harris weren't necessarily everybody's favorite at the beginning of the primaries. So there's work to be done. I mean, neither of them were perfect by any stretch, and I think everybody recognizes that, unless you think I'm wrong. But
no, I'm not. I don't think you're wrong. I don't think that they're the greatest candidates in the world. But I think at the end of the day, we had to get Trump out of office.
For sure. All right, for the next part of the show, we're going to talk about the song we're rocking to, and since Mai's the guest, what song are you rocking to right now?
I mean, what song am I rocking to? Busta Rhymes is one of my favorite MCs. Probably you gotta give him the crown for, or at least he's in the argument for the crown for longevity, being able to switch up his styles. So right now he has a song with one of my favorite artists, Anderson .Paak, called "You," and that song is dope. I'm always rocking to her. Her has 2 singles out right now, and both of those new singles are fire.
Absolute fire. She is just killing it right now.
So yeah, that's on the R&B side. So yeah, man, I'm rocking with her, and Bust the Bus. Bus is one of my favorite MCs. He just released a new album, and yeah.
Have you heard Common's new joint? He dropped one like last week, I think.
No, I am conscious that Common did drop an album, but I didn't hear it yet. So
yeah.
I mean, I'm gonna check it out.
I was listening to it, but I was at work, so I wasn't fully engrossed in it. I feel like if you're rocking to it in a car, like that's like the first time you really hear it. So I haven't really done it like that. But yeah, it's pretty good. Sonically, it was cool from that perspective. I have to listen more to it. Yeah. So closing questions for you. This is just kind of like just random questions just to round everything out. So if you could have a superpower, what would it be?
A superpower, besides being a music artist, I mean, yeah, music artists definitely have a superpower. That's true. I mean, flying, man. I mean, flying is. You could just go anywhere and just fly from one city to the next. Be able to fly above everybody. Flying is a dope superpower. So I think I'm gonna go with flying, man.
That's what's up. I like that one. The engineer in me wants to ask all these questions like, well, can you break the sound barrier when you're flying? Like, what are the limitations physically? Like, but I'm not gonna go there.
Okay.
I almost did, but anyway. Second question and last question is, what's the last book you read or the last book that you read that you would recommend?
Oh, man. I mean, so right now I'm not reading a lot of books. I'm studying for a licensing exam that I want to take. So I'm not really reading a lot of books right now.
Do you recommend that licensing exam?
No, I mean, yeah, the ASWB Social Work Board exam book. So yeah, no, but yeah, I mean, I think the last book that I was reading is The Color of Law. And I think I saw that book upstairs.
Yeah, I got it. Richard Rothstein.
Yeah, at your place. So yeah, I mean, that's the last book that I was reading. And also Ta-Nehisi Coates. I think that he's one of the great writers out right now.
Yeah, for sure. Did you read this novel?
So that's the
Water Dancer.
Yeah, so that's the most recent book that I've read. So yeah.
Yeah, that's what's up. Well, one of these days, I should do like a book review or a book discussion on whatever, maybe a couple of books. Maybe that would be a cool thing to do. Yeah. All right. So I guess the last question is, how can people get at you? How can people find you, support what you're doing, whether it's musically or anything else you're working on?
Yeah, so I mean, hit me up on Instagram. It's MaiMusic5, MAI, the word music, number 5. That's the same Twitter handle I have. I also have another Instagram handle called The Fashion Therapist. So it's The Fashion _therapist. And there I'm just talking about the work that I do in the community, and if I got new workshops or trainings coming up. And yeah, I mean, you can find me either one of those places. And me and Kyle are working together. You're probably going to hear some new music in the near future. So that will be coming out as well. So look forward to that. That's
what's up. Oh, and I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that this is the same Mai Spann who I used as my song that I'm rocking to in the first episode. So this is the man, the legend from that first song. But yeah, so we work together on a music tip, and definitely appreciate your energy musically, and anytime we collaborate, it's always a good time. So yeah, looking forward to more music there. All right, well, that's our show. You can get at me on Instagram at RealDadult. That's RealDadult. And I look forward to any of your comments, suggestions for future shows or on any of the past shows. Appreciate you listening. Be safe, be well. Peace.